It will forever go down in history as probably the hardest sequence I've ever had to film.
Hollywood may seem like a dream for many, but a lot of the times, behind the glitz and glam are actors struggling to even get through a scene. What the cast and crew of TV series and movies have to go through in order to get their work to the big screen is absolutely unimaginable. From harsh filming conditions, strict diets that include dehydration, and life-changing stunts, you're about to be surprised at just how many of the hardest movie scenes were caught on camera.
What was the hardest scene to shoot with me?
All of your scenes are really...
Get out of here.
Tom Holland may have struggled with keeping details of his Marvel movies under wraps, but on set, he has an entire crew to help make sure the public doesn't even catch a glimpse of what they're filming. However, this can make filming extremely difficult for the actors. When Tom and Zendaya filmed their date scene and walked across the bridge, once the director called cut, they'd have to dash to hide in a tiny tent away from the public eye.
And then we had to come back out, and then it got really late, and there was like a football game or something.
Yeah.
Doing this over and over again had Tom and Zendaya absolutely exhausted.
I want to see what happened.
Millie Bobby Brown filmed some of the toughest scenes of her life on the set of Stranger Things Season 3. Remember how cool it looked when Eleven was spinning into the void trying to contact Billy? It may have looked awesome behind the scenes as well, but it was a difficult few hours for Millie. Luckily, her adorable Instagram post let us know having Billy's actor Dacre Montgomery by her side made the process a little more bearable. Euphoria is a trippy experience for the viewer, and the filming behind the scenes made the experience the same for Zendaya, except way more physically demanding. During the party scene where Rue gets highly intoxicated, you might have thought that the room spinning was all done with a green screen, but Zendaya actually had to film in a spinning room. Check out the behind the scenes.
Everything is just spinning and you have no sense of where the real world is.
Zendaya admitted this was one of the most difficult scenes to film because she had no perception of direction and had to make sure she stayed in character. It actually sounds kind of scary. Bridgerton isn't what you would call an action-packed show, but filming the dance scenes were brutal. The cast weren't professional dancers, which meant they endured 6 weeks of intense dance practice. But no amount of practice prepared them for how challenging it was to perform intricate steps and dialogue at the same time. Actress Phoebe Dynevor said it was quite difficult to pull off.
You are a Bridgerton. There is nothing you cannot do.
Celebrities may spend their downtime lounging in penthouses and luxury homes, but on the set of movies like The Hunger Games, they're splashing around sewers. Seriously.
It was a brutal 3 weeks.
For the filming of the sewer sequence in Mockingjay Part 2, they filmed in an actual sewer that was painfully hot. To add to how gross it must have been, after a few hours, Liam Hemsworth's very absorbent costume weighed over 20 pounds, restricting his ability to even act out the scene.
Very physically demanding, very emotionally demanding.
Who didn't want to be a part of Dumbledore's army? Well, when you hear how uncomfortable filming on the Room of Requirement set was, you might just change your mind.
You've done it, Neville. You found the Room of Requirement.
The Phelps twins and Bonnie Wright had a whole lot to say about their difficult experience while shooting the 5th film. I've never told anyone this, but I hated the Room of Requirement set. The set was apparently small, hot, and very cramped, making the conditions less than ideal. Bonnie even said she experienced hysteria from a claustrophobic attack. We bet they were wishing they could actually disapparate somewhere else at that moment. We all know Robert Pattinson has some very strong feelings about his time on Twilight, and to be fair, he put up with quite a bit of what some people would probably call ridiculousness. However, he finally reached his breaking point when it came to Renesmee's birth scene in Breaking Dawn. He claims having to actually bite through a weird prosthetic that was covered in fake blood was the hardest scene he filmed in the entire franchise.
I think that was the major factor.
We just have one word to say about that. Ew. Getting to film in Hungary might seem like a dream, but the Shadow and Bone cast are admitting that while it was beautiful, a lot of the time it was rough. Most of the weather conditions you see going on in the show were 100% real, especially the sleet and thunderstorms. Now imagine having to spend hours on end enduring these conditions.
Pretty terrifying.
Actors Danielle Galligan and Callahan Skogman said the cherry on top was having to film in a cold water tank during these conditions. Cherry deals with much heavier content than Tom Holland is used to filming for Marvel, which made the whole process of filming the movie difficult. The war scenes in particular are very overwhelming and require so many pieces to fit together. Needless to say, Tom was challenged and said, "This role took me to some of the darkest places I have ever been. Emotionally, physically, anythingly. He even almost broke his nose while filming."
So I'm really, really proud of this movie.
The After series is steamy, but behind the scenes, we guess you can say the steaminess evaporates. We all know this iconic lake scene between Tessa and Hardin, right? Well, for actor Hero Finds Tiffin, that scene was suffocating. Literally, he wasn't able to touch the floor in the lake, which meant he was struggling to keep afloat and not drown while also trying to give his best performance.
You think that's weird?
No.
If they sound a little out of breath during the scene, it's because they were. In the end, many toe cramps later, they managed to get it done. We've heard of actors having to go on strict diets to get in shape for a film, but for this role in The Witcher, Henry Cavill had to dehydrate himself. You heard us. The actor essentially gave up water for 4 days in order to film shirtless scenes, like this one in the bathtub.
It's a very iconic moment.
Supposedly, it helped him seem like he had more muscle definition. It got so bad by the 4th day that he said he could actually smell nearby water.
I was surprised that I still existed.
Just watching the Battle of the Bastards in Game of Thrones was tense, but for Kit Harington, it was one of the most challenging scenes he ever had to shoot in his role as Jon Snow. They had to rehearse the scene for weeks because the battle was one long continuous take, which means everything had to go perfectly. As you could imagine, it took hours and hours. We're exhausted just thinking about it.
It feels good to be alive.
Sometimes it isn't wild set locations or epic stunts that make things difficult to film. Sometimes it's just baking. We're sorry to burst your bubble, but to all the boys, Lara Jean is far from a good baker in real life. Lana Condor has explained how difficult those baking scenes were for her because she had no experience. In order to get through it, they had to hire a professional baker to stand next to her and instruct her on what to do and how to do it just so it could pass as convincing on screen.
It was a educational experience.
You'd assume that the hard scenes to film for Brie Larson and Captain Marvel would be some intense stunts, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Her most challenging scenes were the ones she had to film with her furry friend Goose.
Great scene partner, gave a lot.
Brie is highly allergic to cats, so you can just imagine how she must have been filming on those days. But Brie was able to find humor in the situation.
It was kind of like the ongoing joke that I would do crazy wirework stunts.
But then the cat showed up on set and I was like, we need to have a plan.
I'd be stressed out, washing my hands a million times.
Believe it or not, the actual heist scenes in Money Heist were a piece of cake to film for the actors in comparison to their season 3 adventure on a boat. They were filming in the middle of an ocean in Thailand in weather that was excruciatingly hot. The mix of high waves and blazing sun had the cast getting sick over the side of the boat. Actor Miguel Herrán even had a heat stroke by the end of it. We won't even touch on how awkward filming the 50 Shades of Grey films must have been, but we're going to discuss what Dakota Johnson is claiming as one of the toughest scenes to film: the elevator scene. The elevator was filled with the extras we see in the final cut. But behind the cameras were 50 crew members, all confined to the tiny space where Dakota and Jamie Dornan got quite intimate.
It is a kind of bizarre experience.
Andrew Lincoln's first scene of the entire Walking Dead series ended up being his most difficult to film. It's the moment where Rick is faced with having to take down a little zombie girl.
That's when I realized this is going to be the greatest job of my career, but also the most painful.
This emotionally bothered him so much that after a few takes, he was so distressed and physically needed to stop. Talk about nauseating. Just what did Leonardo DiCaprio have to go through in order to finally win an Oscar? Well, his time filming The Revenant wasn't pretty, and it's difficult to pick just one challenging thing he had to endure on camera. From having to eat raw liver, film with a real bear, and develop hypothermia, we're going to say Leo wins for having the most difficult time on set.
I've never quite seen anything cinematically like that.
Watching Saul being kidnapped and forced to dig his own grave was dark, but behind the scenes it was also grim, not only for Saul's actor, Bob Odenkirk, but for Jesse and Walt's actors, Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul as well. It was absolutely freezing on location, and the winds were so strong the dirt around them was blowing straight into their faces. Check out what Walt had to say about the scene. "I'm supposed to hold the gun out, and I'm so cold that I'm shaking, and I'm like, oh my god." That was probably the toughest scene to do.
He knew what he was talking about.
Charlize Theron and Zoe Kravitz had a lot to say about being on the set of Mad Max, including that filming the movie was one of the hardest things they've ever done. They were filming in conditions that included extreme heat, beating sun, dust storms, and days that went way beyond your average 8-hour workday. By the end of filming, the cast was exhausted from the difficult action choreography and dangerous car chases. We don't blame them.
It was really fun.
Who knew being an actor could get this difficult? It's hard to believe how much the cast and crew of these projects endured just to bring us our favorite TV series and films. We know they're getting paid really well for their work, but is it worth it? What do you think? Thanks for watching!